When I moved to Montenegro 12 years ago, no one was even thinking about things like legal income. In other words, there was only one goal. Everyone, absolutely everyone, had the same goal to make money, since no one was checking anyone. Yes, there were a few isolated cases where someone got caught for tax evasion and was punished. But there were so few such cases that, in short, no one really worried about it. But times are changing, and about 2 years ago, all reasonable people, seeing the changes happening in the country, started to think that it wasn't enough just to try to make money. They needed to aim for having legitimate income, so that if an inspector came, they could actually show where their money came from. I've already made several videos on this topic. The biggest and most comprehensive one you'll probably see somewhere right here. So let's think about how, in fact, you can obtain legitimate income in Montenegro. There are several ways. The first is from abroad. This is very commonly used. It's a very common practice among foreigners in Montenegro, since a huge number of foreigners who have come to live in the country are various types of remote workers, or they simply have income from somewhere abroad, and accordingly they receive income from abroad. This is not prohibited by anyone. As in most other countries, such income is taxed in Montenegro. In Montenegro, foreign income is taxed at 15% if there is no double taxation agreement between the countries. There is such an agreement with many countries. I have a separate video on my channel where these countries are listed. Unfortunately for many people, unfortunately for many, Russia has unilaterally withdrawn from the agreement. I don't know if it was with all countries or not all, but with very many, including Montenegro. Not long ago, there was such an agreement with Russia, but now there is no such agreement. Therefore, income received in Russia is also taxed, must also be paid on this income at 15%. That's it. The most common ways of earning income in another country now, in Russia, in America, it doesn't matter where, through your own business. If you have a business abroad, by all means go ahead and run it. But if there is no double taxation agreement between the countries, don't forget to pay taxes in Montenegro as well. Remote work. Remotely, or maybe not remotely. For example, sailors can live in Montenegro but periodically go on duty at sea. Income from renting out property. Well, that's a very common situation. There are even people here who basically don't do anything else in life. They just rent out apartments somewhere in Moscow or in another country and live in Montenegro off the income from that property. And I guess you could also add the stock market and trading on the stock market to this list. By the way, yes, there's a nuance here. So-called digital nomads who get residency in Montenegro as digital nomads, that is, as remote workers, they also pay this 15%. As for all the messages all over the internet claiming that digital nomads in Montenegro are exempt from paying taxes, I have no idea where people got that from. No one has ever published anything like that, and it's not written in any law. They pay taxes on their foreign income on the same basis as any other person who has residency in Montenegro. Let's move on. Point 2. You can earn income from gambling. For example, I have several clients who are professional poker players. They play every day and make a living by playing poker. According to the law on personal income tax, gambling, whether it's poker, not poker, casino, or anything else, income from gambling, is exempt from taxation. Accordingly, this income is absolutely legal. Gambling is completely legal in Montenegro, and no taxes are paid on it. Point 3. From renting out real estate in Montenegro. Well, there are different taxation options depending on how you rent it out. For example, with long-term rentals, 30% is deducted from the taxable base. This amount basically stays with you to cover your expenses, like if you did some repairs or something broke. So you spend about 30% on these expenses, and then you pay a 15% tax on the remaining 70%. The standard tax, the personal income tax in Montenegro is 15%. I think these are fairly lenient conditions, especially if you compare the taxes and the entry-level real estate package with other countries, particularly Western European countries. The next option income from employment in Montenegro. Well, I won't give a detailed lecture right now on how payroll taxes are calculated in Montenegro. I have a separate video on that topic. If you're interested, check it out. I'll just say that taxes are divided into two groups. That is, the first part is paid by the employer from their company on your behalf, and the second part is kind of paid by you, but it's also paid by the employer, again from their company, but it's deducted from your salary. So there are taxes that are added to the net salary paid by the employer, and there are taxes that are paid by the employee. In Montenegro, salaries are paid exclusively from the employer's company account to the employee's account. Any other forms of salary payment are not provided for by Montenegrin law. If someone tells you that they will pay you in cash, that is a violation of the law. This doesn't apply only when you are getting a job. By the way, this also applies when you open your own company. You are required to pay yourself a salary every month from the company account to the employee account. The next option from business in Montenegro is dividends. So you've been running your business for a year, and during that time you probably received a relatively small salary. And now the first quarter of the year following the reporting year has arrived. At this time you can receive dividends. Hooray! Now there will be a lot of money. Dividends are also paid from the company's account to the founder's account. Gifts are not subject to tax. That's good news. By the way, there are people who use this method to legitimize, well, maybe not all, but at least part of their income. For example, you need to buy an apartment, but you don't have any legal declared income. And nowadays, buying without legal income is becoming risky. So people make arrangements like this. Mom, here's 100,000 for you. How about you transfer a gift from your account in Kazakhstan to my account in Montenegro? Of course, it's clear that this is technically illegal. In principle, though, it's very hard to actually catch someone red-handed with this kind of operation, and it does happen. Gifts are not taxed. Now, let's talk about who is at risk and who is not. Who absolutely needs to have white legal income, and who maybe doesn't really need to worry about it too much. It all depends on your salary. That is, if your income significantly exceeds your expenses, if you can't possibly spend all your money just on living, then you're on the risk group and you absolutely need to have legal income. Well, let's say you have a family of 3 and you spend, for example, 36,000 euros a year, that is 3,000 per month, but you earn, say, 100,000 euros. Yes, I know, that's a good income. Now people will start saying, who here actually earns 100,000? Guys, I have clients who earn 100,000. Of course, not everyone does, but there are some. So your expenses are 36,000, your income is 100,000, which means you have an extra 64,000. And at the very least, you need to legalize those 64,000 plus whatever else you supposedly spent on living expenses. So what's the point? How much you spent on living, whether it was 3,000 euros a month, 2,000 or 1,000, is basically impossible to determine. No one knows how much you actually spent on food. No one knows the exact amount you spent on that. But whatever you have left over, that ends up somewhere. It either ends up as real estate or some other expensive purchases, or it sits in a bank account, and accordingly that's visible. And that already poses a certain risk. So, even if you're not declaring all of your income, you at least need to declare the portion that's surplus plus maybe a little extra on top. Again, I'm not encouraging anyone to hide part of their income, I'm just stating some very basic objective truths. And I will give a couple of examples from the lives of my clients. Here's an example. I have a client named Evgenia. I won't mention her last name, there's no need for that. She was once summoned to the bank. She transferred to her account. At that time, SWIFT transfers were a bit easier than they are now. She transferred money from Russia to her account in a Montenegrin bank via SWIFT. I don't know the exact amount, but judging by the fact that she was called into the bank, it must have been a significant sum. She transferred the money to buy real estate in Montenegro. She was called into the bank and they asked, "What is this money for?" She replied, "Well, I want to buy an apartment. I transferred it from Russia." And where did the money in your Russian account come from? I sold an apartment. Bring the sales contract for your property in Russia, translate it into Serbian, and then we'll approve the transfer without any problems. So that's the second example. I have another client here, Vladimir. Again, I won't mention his last name. He once withdrew quite a large sum of money from the bank. And he didn't withdraw it all in one day. He was taking out a decent amount every day. In the end, over the course of a month, he withdrew several tens of thousands of euros. They called him in and asked, "Why are you withdrawing so much money?" He said, "Well, I bought an apartment and I'm furnishing it." We suspect that you might be involved in some kind of cash out operations, and that something here isn't quite right. So please stop withdrawing such large amounts. And if you need to spend money on something, use your card instead. In short, there are cases like this where people are called in somewhere and ask questions about the source of their funds. It does happen. Therefore, once again, having legitimate income is very important nowadays, especially for those who already have a good income, and it's something you should really think about. Goodbye, everyone.